of Dave Frank, who's our guest today. He's a fantastic solo pianist and teacher and regular pianist, and he's going to have a lot to say about the piano and teaching. He's a student of Lennie Tristano. We'll talk about Lennie and his remarkable days with Lennie. Dave's also a very spiritual guy. He's a yogi of sorts. I'd like to talk about that. And Dave has successfully positioned himself as a teacher on the internet through a series of masterclasses that he posted. And the response was so great, he began teaching via Skype. He's teaching people from all over the world now. He told me about a guy yesterday, a new student from Siberia. We never quite know where they're going to come from. But I've known Dave a couple of years now, and he is not only a great musician and teacher, but a person as well. I feel very lucky in my experiences here in the world of jazz, being part of this community. I've met some incredible people. I'm very lucky to have them as friends. Dave is certainly one of them. Yesterday we had Randy Brecker on. I've known Randy since 1978. He is not only a great trumpet player, he is a remarkable person as well. A very open-hearted, giving guy. And his brother Michael was like that as well. And Bob Mintzer, who was on last week, same thing. So something about creativity and the people I've met for the most part are very, very cool. And I feel lucky to know them. So we are happy to be here today, Tuesday, May 19th. Tomorrow we're going to feature the baritone sax player Roger Rosenberg. You might not know him by name. You've probably heard him on a number of recordings. If you've seen Steely Dan live in the past 5-8 years, you've seen Roger. He's played with Michael Brecker, Dectet. He's played with Tito Puente, Bob Mintzer's big band, Buddy Rich. He's done a lot. Wonderful guy, Roger Rosenberg. Thursday, an excellent trumpeter, Winston Byrd. We're going to learn more about Winston. He's not really the most famous guy around, but he's played with a lot of cats, knows a lot of cats, has a lot of great stories, and a superb trumpeter. Not an easy instrument, the trumpet. Clark Terry is a friend of mine. He once told me, I said, why do you practice every day, man? You're a master of the trumpet. He said to me that, well, if I miss a day, I know it. And if I miss 2 days, people with big ears miss it. And if I miss 3 days, everybody knows it. It's a serious commitment to play the trumpet, that's for sure. And on Friday, a show I'm really looking forward to, my friend Lauren Schoenberg, who is a jazz activist and a musician and was once Benny Goodman's manager. How about that? He, as I mentioned yesterday, he has a Facebook group called Rare Photos, and Rare Jazz Photos, to be exact. And he's always posting, and people are always posting these incredible photos that just blow my mind, really. So what Lauren's going to come on, we're going to look at some photos, and we're going to talk about them. And I'm sure they're going to blow your mind. So without further ado, hello, Dave Frank. Okay. I'm having a little bit of a problem with your audio. Hold on one second. Say, give me a 1, 2, 3, Dave.
1, 2, 3.
All right. My apologies. 2, 3. We're back.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Take 2. Hey, Dave, what's happening?
Brett, good to see you, man. What's happening?
Hey,
coming to you from our bunker on 52nd Street in Manhattan. Secured away on the 5th floor of a walk-up where no virus dare tread.
Well, Dave's been posting these pictures of a totally empty New York City. He lives in Midtown East, and he takes these walks, and it's eerie. What's it like walking in a completely deserted New York?
Well, you actually can't believe what your eyes are seeing. It is truly something out of a sci-fi movie. You'll go whole blocks, whole avenues, whole blocks as far as you can see, and there won't be anybody on Broadway or Fifth Avenue. There was nobody in front of Radio City Music Hall on Saturday night. It is, it's amazing how New Yorkers have followed this social distancing. I mean, the whole entire incredible hydraulic energy blowout that New York is every minute of every day completely came to a stop. And so all the buildings are there, but there's no people. And then every now and then you'll see a little group of people, a couple of people here and there with masks. And so either, it's like the result of a neutron bomb, or everyone is a surgeon and you're on like a medical show. And so it's very strange. And it's a testament to New Yorkers, first of all, that they were able to actually make this incredible change. It's like switching off the largest electrical circuit on the planet, just like boom. But it's very quiet. The flowers are blooming high and everything else is thriving. And there are no people around. So it's interesting. I mean, it's got its own peculiar quiet charm, but it's really like a sci-fi movie here.
Well, as I mentioned in the intro, you do a lot of teaching on Skype. So as you told me the other day, really no change for you. You're still teaching all the time.
Yeah, I'm very lucky and blessed, as you are, and other jazz people that I've heavily invested on online teaching for the last 5 years or so. And this is only this whole situation we're going through has only made that more so. There's not a whole lot else to do for a lot of people, most of us, especially up till now, but to hang inside and practice and woodshed. So it's a great time to be a jazz student or jazz teacher, and I'm very fortunate to have beautiful souls that I'm working with across the world, and they're learning jazz on a regular basis, and it couldn't be more fun.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. I'm very curious. How did you get into playing the piano, Dave?
Well, my mom was a local piano teacher in the area, and we had a piano growing up, and she gave me lessons when I was 4. And so I started on a traditional classical track and loved that. And then when I was 12, I discovered B.B. King and Elton John, and that was the end of the classical playing. I was very lucky to have a great teacher on Long Island where I grew up. His name was John LaRosa. He was a local teacher in the area I lived, but he had a great jazz background, and he taught me for 4 years. And then when I was 15, I had the opportunity to meet and start studying with Lennie Tristano in Queens. So from the age of 15, I was under Lennie's wing, and that was, needless to say, a profound experience.
Well, why was it a profound experience?
Well, it was like, if you're a painter, imagine going and seeing Matisse every week at his studio. Lennie was one of the first people to make a pedagogy out of jazz, and specifically jazz piano. So I had read about Lennie in a book called Jazz Masters of the 50s. I was attending Berklee in the summer of 1971. And I was in the library, and a woman across from me had a very rare Lennie record, the new Tristano. And I knew of it, and I knew how great Lennie was, and I was looking for a teacher. So I started talking with her, and I said, I'm looking for a teacher. And she reached over and gave me Lennie's number. And I actually called Lennie from the dorm at Berklee the first time, and was 15 years old, completely nervous. And he picked up the phone, and I said, Mr. Tristano. He said, call me Lennie. I said, I need help. Like that. He goes, silence on the hook for a minute. He goes, what kind of help do you need? I said, pianistic help. So he said, this is what you do. When you get back from Berklee, you call me up and you come over to my house and you come here and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to rip you off and you can tell me to go fuck myself. Click. So that was the first conversation with him. I was like, yes, sir, anything you say, rip me off, go fuck yourself, you know. So the next thing you know, at the age of 15, I was in Lennie's living room, and he asked me if I practiced, and I said, yeah, I'm practicing 5 to 9 hours a day. And he said, oh, that'll do it. And he said, what do you play like? I said, at 15 years old, I said, well, my playing is a little bit like a combination of Cecil Taylor and Art Tatum. And Lennie cracked up and he goes, geez, you know, I'd really like to hear that. Would you mind playing something? So I said, no, I'm not yet. So it was cool. But I spent the next 7 years in Lennie's living room every week. And he was just the most beautiful guy. And it was a very interesting and unusual circumstance in that he was blind, and there was a little getting used to of that. Didn't take long at all. He was so personable. He had such a great sense of humor, and he was so giving to his students. It was a whole beautiful scene that Lennie had around him at that time. And so just to be a part of that was an amazing way to grow up. It's like going to see, you know, Picasso every week, to have that kind of opportunity. When we first started taking lessons, he charged $10 a lesson.
Oh, my God.
For half an hour. And then once a month when he paid his rent, he charged $15. And that's what we paid to hang out with Lennie. And he had a whole beautiful system of teaching, which was, you know, not very common at all at that point. We're talking 1971. Lennie developed a system of teaching where he was able to separate out the elements of playing, namely technique, theory, and ear training. And he had specific ways that we would develop those capacities of playing through exercises. It was all very kind of organized and structured. One thing was for technique. Another thing was to develop your ear by singing with the solos of the masters. Another thing was these incredible lists of chord voicings. And so he was really prepared to teach through his own experience. He knew what it took to play jazz, and he actually could give people that foundation. And he was a real character, funny as hell, loved his students. We loved him. It was beautiful, beautiful days.
Well, we've got a question here from Mike G. You've already said something about Lennie's pedagogy. Mike says his transcription method is beautiful to me. Did learning with Lennie involve a lot of transcription?
Well, it didn't involve any written transcription because Lennie was blind. We didn't really have much use for that. But one of Lennie's biggest innovations in teaching was this system of singing with the great solos of the masters. So in those days, we had a turntable, and you would usually start off with Louis Armstrong. You would go to Lester Young. You would go to Charlie Parker. Spent a couple of years exclusively on Charlie Parker. We went to Fats Navarro, Charlie Christian, and then on from there, Roy Eldridge, Lester Young, of course. So as part of your assignment for the week, you had a solo that you sang. And what that meant is you came to the studio, Lennie's studio, with an album, in those days, vinyl record album, and you just put it on his turntable, and you sang you just took Charlie Parker's solo, for example, and you sang with that at regular speed, and then you would turn Lennie's turntable down to 16 and sing with Charlie Parker at half speed. And you didn't have to particularly analyze it. You didn't have to transcribe it or write it. But it was all of the nuances and the essence of playing in terms of phrasing, note selection, how one phrase connected to another. All the basic aspects and the nuances of soloing would be conveyed directly to your DNA like through an infusion of singing with the records. So that was a big part of every lesson. You used to hear people in the waiting room. When you were in the waiting room, you would hear people singing with Bird or Lester Young, and it was a very fun exercise. But listening to Charlie Parker at 16 on the record player, which is half speed in those days, was like listening to Lester Young at 33. In those days, when you slowed the recordings down, it did not keep the same pitch. It went down an octave. So when we were singing with Charlie Parker at 16 on the record player, it used to be like boo ba doo ba doo ba da ba doo ba doo da ba da ba. And Lennie would be smiling the whole time. So that would typically be the end of every lesson, would be singing with one of the great solos. And that was really a amazing technique. And if you stayed with it for a period of time, the language, the jazz language, became a part of your mind, your interior workings, and you could speak it. It's just exactly like if you were speaking, learning Spanish. When we learned Spanish in school, they gave us these dialogue records. And so we would listen to the dialogue records, and they'd have a sentence in Spanish, let's say, voy a la biblioteca, and then they would leave a space. And in that space, you would repeat what you heard. And in this way, first learning and then repeating, you would catch the syntax of the language and the structure of the phrasing and how you put sentences together. And this is a part of learning the language, is to hear it spoken and then speak it back. Hear the sound of a phrase or a sentence, and then you say it or speak it or play it without listening to it. So that kind of a method internalizes the jazz language, and that's what Lennie had us doing. So that's one of his brilliant teaching methods, was doing that. Another one for piano players, he used to have us doing scales and also improvising exercises with only part of the hand. So I'm sure piano players will appreciate just how wild this is. He used to have us playing scales with 2 fingers in opposite directions. So you'd only use 1, 2 fingerings, and then you'd only use 4, 5. And I endured 5 years of these kind of exercises. He would have us improvising with 1 finger only. And like you'd go start on the thumb in the right hand, you'd improvise on a tune, and you'd do 1 chorus with the thumb, with the metronome really slow, and then you would do the next chorus with the 2nd finger, and then the next chorus with the 3rd finger. And he had you going through the whole hand. And finally, you were improvising with just the pinky of the left hand, and actually trying to create lines just using your pinky. And I did that kind of stuff for years. And to this day, I don't exactly know why.
Well, we're going to find out why in a second. I'm going to play some solo piano music. I promise not to end it prematurely here. And then we're going to come back, and I want to talk to Dave about his transition to becoming a teacher. This is, once again, Dave Frank solo piano, his composition, Indian Summer. Talk about that in a minute. Beautiful. Dave Frank, Indian Summer. Dave, how did you get into teaching yourself?
Well, I think Lennie was a role model for a lot of us in a lot of ways. So, studying with Lennie, I saw that you could actually make your whole life out of music through teaching, teaching as a way to earn a living, and that appealed to me very much. And I started very young, when I was 16, just teaching some local high school friends and so on. And I always thought that teaching was about the best human interaction you could have, in terms of you're with a great person, and you're talking about music, and you're showing them how to discover the flow of the music within them, and teaching them about this great art form that we've inherited. And it's a great way to make contact with people, and the money is good, and it's a lifestyle. So I think I saw that lifestyle with Lennie, and I thought, man, this would be great to do it. So I tried it, and it worked. The greatest thing about Lennie, and also about Charlie Banakis, who I studied with for 20 years in Boston, was that they had clear pedagogy. So what I hear from jazz students all over the world all the time is that there's so much information. The field of jazz piano and jazz is so vast. And luckily, in the time between the 70s and now, there's been a tremendous amount of material written by great people, a lot of great books, videos, instructional situations, colleges. So there's a tremendous amount of information out there that people can access, that can teach them, to guide them on their way to learn to play. But oftentimes it's not organized in a coherent fashion. So what I learned from Lennie and Charlie was that if you wanted to learn something, let's say you want to learn a bass line, that there was a specific step-by-step approach that you could engage that would take you to that goal. And so Lennie's lessons were always like, we had technique, and then we had voicings, and then we played tunes, and then we sang with records. So it was a way to get a complete musical education. So I took that as a role model. It's been a tremendous, a wonderful life teaching. I recommend it highly to anybody. It's very fulfilling. And now with the technology, you can do it from your living room, and you can reach people in areas that you never could before.
Well, in terms of students, because there is such a wealth of information, so many choices, let's say a young piano student wants to find some online resources. How do they know what to look for? What would you recommend to someone who is kind of, I got this and I got this. What's the best path for them?
Yeah, just go to davefrankjazz.com. Just kidding. There are incredible resources. There are different types of resources. One type of resource that there's many of are great teachers and players who have put up libraries of lessons that you could pay by like the month. So there's quite a few of these: Jazz Piano Online, Piano with Johnny, Piano with Willie, and these are people that have dedicated their lives to putting a library of materials. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. These are people that have put together a whole teaching video curriculum online. And so that works for a lot of people. So if people don't have the resources to afford private lessons, or they don't want to, or they want to go totally at their own pace without any kind of commitment, a lot of people find these online resources really helpful. So I would just type in, go to Google and type in jazz piano studies online, something like that, and it'll come up. So you have libraries of video teachings, which is one way. And then the other way is to study privately with a teacher. And these days now it's 100% over Skype or online. But this is something that's been developing the last 5 years, ever since Skype started having a visual element. Something about Skype and the visual, the online platform with the piano, because it's a visual instrument, it translated perfectly to the online medium. So I can, when you're teaching on Skype, you just point the camera to the piano, yourself at the piano, and I can see the piano keys, I can see your fingers, I can see where you're going to make a mistake before you make it. In some ways, it's even better than teaching live because I'm looking right at their hands on the keyboard. But the piano turned out to be very teachable online. And so that's where the whole movement now. So now there's a lot of people like myself that are teaching. And so I would just do a search online for different teachers, and then I would go and listen to them play and try to find an example of how they teach, and then find somebody that that works, that seems to resonate with you.
Well, one of the things Dave did to begin his teaching journey online was to post a series of masterclasses. These are 1-hour classes that he still posts that are free and contain fantastic information, usually by himself. But a couple of times he has enlisted the help of several other people, including Pat Martino, the guitarist. We're going to look at a clip here that from Dave's masterclass with Pat Martino.
One, two, three.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Dave Frank and Pat Martino alone together. What was it like working with a genius like Pat?
Pat was the greatest musician I ever played with in my life. When you're in a room with somebody as great as Pat, you realize why they are who they are. That we spent a whole day with him, and we did an hour and a half master class where he got a chance to talk to all about his approach to the guitar, and there's a special class called The Nature of the Guitar from that class, the big class. We have a small class called The Nature of Guitar. And he explained his really unusual and unique and enlightening theories of guitar and jazz and what he thought improv was about. And he told us about his history and studying with different people growing up. He was the most gracious guy and the greatest player ever. Just the sound that came out of his instrument when he was sitting right there, the precision. And one of the things that Pat said that was really, really important, it was that his method of learning is precision. So he said he would listen to kind of goes along with what we were saying before. He would listen to a Wes Montgomery solo and practice it for 13 hours until he got every single nuance of the solo. And then he would fall asleep, and his parents would find him asleep with the guitar, with the Wes Montgomery record going around and around. It was great, man. Pat was great. He also now, I just want to mention that he needs our help, that Pat is ill at the time of this taping. And there is actually a fund on GoFundMe, the Pat Martino Fund. So he's looking for folks. He needs financial help because of his health situation at the moment, and it's just something I thought I'd tell people about because Pat's one of the great jazz musicians of our time and one of the great jazz figures. Everybody you talk to will say that he's the most generous, terrific guy, and he plays like an angel, but a precise angel with balls.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always been a monster. He's overcome other health issues. he had an aneurysm and he lost his memory. He had to start all
Yeah.
over again, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Dave, how many master classes do you have in the archive now?
Okay, right now at davefrankjazz.com at the Masterclass Archive, you will find 53 different in-depth master classes. And the class would either be one of two things. Either to be a class on a person, like there's a class on Keith Jarrett, class on Chick, class on Art Tatum, class on Errol Garner, class on Oscar Peterson, a long class on Bill Evans that dissects their style. And so you can follow along if you're interested and learn a lot about the stylistic elements that go into their playing. That's one type of master class, there are probably 30 or 40 of those. And then there's 10 or 20 that deal with a specific topic in jazz or jazz piano. So, for example, there's a walking bass line clinic that teaches how to develop the walking bass line style step by step. And all these classes are at davefrankjazz.com, Masterclass Archive. They're all free for everybody. It's a great resource if you want to spend some time with jazz and learn some of the components of playing. You can watch them at 3 in the morning in your feety pajamas if you want.
Yeah, well, question from from Spain. Do you work with beginners? What level of students?
Me personally?
Yes.
I work with beginners in jazz, not necessarily beginners on the piano. I think Skype teaching can be very effective, assuming the student has maybe a year or two of experience in playing any style. I don't know that I would teach a total beginner to the instrument over Skype. I think there may be some teachers who do that, but I think I'd be reluctant to do that because I think you need to maybe be there for some so-called hands-on training at that point. But after a year or two of experience playing any style, that's fine. And I and other people that do what I do, and Lennie himself, taught and do teach students of all jazz levels. Beginning jazz level is fine. A beginning jazz level is different than the beginning level of the instrument.
But you also, you're not only restricted to piano, right? You teach jazz improvisation to anyone.
Right. That's true. And Lennie did that as well, because the principles of improvisation are the same for all instruments, although there are many peculiarities for each individual instrument. Again, I wouldn't recommend an instrumentalist that doesn't know their instrument start studying jazz with somebody that doesn't play their instrument. But it works fine as long as you have the basic knowledge of the instrument.
Well, speaking of master classes and master musicians, we're going to go to another master musician that Dave did a master class with. Perhaps someone who's really not that well known, but musicians certainly do. His name, Dick Hyman.
All
Oh
right.
yeah, some serious chops on display there. For those of you who don't know Dick Hyman, maybe you've seen the infamous Charlie Parker clip. There's very little
That's
video
right.
of Charlie Parker. In the early 50s, he was on a New York TV show with Dizzy. Leonard Feather presented them with their Downbeat Awards for that year, and they played Hot House. And Dick Hyman was the pianist. He was just a kid, obviously. Dave, what
He
was it
played
like playing
great
with
on
Dick
that, by the
Hyman?
way. What's that?
What was it like playing with Dick Hyman?
Dick Hyman is a master teacher, master player, incredible musician to spend his whole life. He's still with us. He's about 91 or 2 at the moment. I saw him not long ago. He still plays great. Just the greatest, most generous person. He has a book series called The Century of Jazz Piano. He's a meticulous, incredible teacher that knows everything about all styles. And he also specializes on early styles of jazz, which I don't think there's anybody else that does that. So I also had a chance, and there's an hour-and-a-half masterclass on the archive of talking to Dick Hyman about his career and what it was like to hear Art Tatum and grow up in that environment. And Dick did some great solo playing. We played a couple of tunes together. And howdy to Dick out there, man, because he's just phenomenal man of jazz. I just want to mention, I know we're coming to the end, 2 things. One is I want to acknowledge that Brett is one of the great men of jazz around right now. And Brett, I've known Brett for about 5 years, and I just want to tell everybody, you know him through this channel and all that he does, but this is a man who's completely committed to the art of jazz and also to musicians. So he cares about musicians. He cares about the music. He's cataloged, I don't know, how many videos now, Brett?
2,200.
Yeah, so he has 2,200 curated videos of the greatest jazz across all time periods. And in addition to that, Brett is like our Nat Hentoff. He's a great humanitarian. He's a great filmmaker. And what he's doing is a fantastic service to jazz. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Great comment here. A guy based in Tucson here, Mick Garrison, who's plays a number of instruments, said, "I'm just glad my life's passion is music and not, say, sports. I feel like you can keep growing as a musician till the end. Even as your chops slow, your concepts and choices can continue to evolve." What's your thought on that, Dave?
I'll tell you my thoughts. So here's a book series. I feel I should take this opportunity for as much self-promotion as possible. This is my book series called Joy of Improv. There's 2 volumes. It's a curriculum for beginning improvisers. And I just want to read the first statement, because it's exactly goes along with what this person said. Every human being has the potential to improvise music. Within you, an infinite stream of music can flow, as endless as an ocean and as individual as a fingerprint. The creative possibilities within even the simplest musical forms are limitless. These infinite possibilities exist at your fingertips, awaiting your discovery. The ability to improvise will open the door to a lifetime of creative fulfillment and artistic expression. And so I just want to say that's completely true in my experience and the experience of many friends of mine and fellow educators. So I'd just like to encourage anybody out there on any instrument, in any place in the world, if you want to learn this music, there are many ways you can do it, and it is tremendously fulfilling, a fantastic way to spend your life and express yourself, who you are. And it's a beautiful experience to play and learn, and I encourage everybody to take it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank Dave for joining us today. Dave Frank Jazz. He's all over YouTube and lots of masterclasses, performances. Dave, we're going to go out with one of your compositions. St. Patrick's and You?
Prayer at St. Patrick's.
And how did you come up with that title?
Well, I live about 2 blocks from St. Patrick's, and I went there to make a prayer, and it was a profound place, and there's a lot of people praying in there all the time, and there was a special vibe there. So I'm sure if my Jewish grandmother knew about this, she would not be all that excited. But be that as it may, this piece is written about a trip to the cathedral, prayer at St. Patrick's Day.